Everyone's got loose change lying around. But what if I told you that a single old Lincoln penny could be worth more than your car, or even your house? These aren't myths or collectors' fantasies. They're real coins, hiding in circulation, waiting to be found. In this countdown, we're revealing the 5 rarest and most valuable Lincoln cents that can turn a penny into pure gold. Let's dive in before someone else cashes in on your luck. You might be holding a fortune in your pocket change, Mike, because these 5 ordinary-looking pennies are worth thousands, even millions of dollars. Don't blink. 1 cent could change your life. Pennies, the coin everyone ignores. But inside that copper color hides pure treasure. Some of these coins are worth more than gold, and most people have no clue they're sitting right in their wallets or coin jars. The Lincoln Penny 1963 coin stands as one of the most fascinating chapters in American numismatic history. A coin that seems ordinary to the untrained eye, yet carries with it layers of heritage, politics, economics, artistry, and symbolism that define an entire era. To understand the story of the 1963 Lincoln penny, you must first travel back to the origins of the Lincoln cent itself, in 1909 when the United States celebrated the centennial of the birth of Abraham Lincoln, President Theodore Roosevelt, who believed that American coinage should be bold, artistic, and filled with meaning, personally encouraged the replacement of the Indian head cent with a new design that would forever change American coinage. Victor David Brenner, a Lithuanian-born sculptor, was chosen to design the new cent, and he placed the profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, creating the very first regular issue coin in American history to feature a real historical figure rather than an allegorical representation. This decision was revolutionary and deeply symbolic as it paid tribute to the 16th president and his role in preserving the Union. From that point onward, the Lincoln cent became not just a piece of currency, but a national icon produced in massive numbers throughout the decades. The coin traveled with soldiers in 2 world wars, sat in the pockets of farmers and factory workers, rang in the cash registers of small-town America, and became one of the most recognizable coins in the world. By the time the year 1963 arrived, the Lincoln cent had already seen over half a century of continuous production and was entering an era defined by Cold War tensions, rapid economic expansion, and cultural transformation. The 1963 Lincoln penny holds significance because it belongs to the last full decade when pennies were struck primarily from a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. A metallic formula that had defined the Lincoln cent since 1909, this heavy copper alloy gave the coin its distinctive reddish-brown appearance, and weight collectors today treasure the 1963 issues because they are among the last to carry that rich traditional feel before later decades introduced changes to composition and luster. In the 1980s, the penny would transition to a copper-plated zinc core, but in 1963, the coin still embodied the original vision of Brenner and the early 20th century minting tradition. The obverse of the 1963 penny features the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln, his bust sharply detailed with the word liberty to the left, the date 1963 to the right, and the motto, "In God We Trust," arching above his head. This was a period of strong and crisp die engraving, and many examples of 1963 cents exhibit sharp details, making them popular for high-grade mint state collections. The reverse displays the classic wheat ears design first introduced in 1909, 2 stylized stalks of Durham wheat encircle the denomination 1 cent, with the inscription United States of America, and the motto E pluribus unum, positioned above this wheat reverse design, had been a staple of the cent for more than 50 years until 1958, when it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. However, the 1963 coin still carried this iconic design in its final years of production, and that is one of the reasons collectors hold it. Dear in terms of mintage, the year 1963 was remarkable with production numbers in the billions. The Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of coins, and the Denver Mint struck even more with the mint mark D placed just below the date. Coins from Philadelphia bore no mint mark, while Denver issues carry the small d. Both varieties are common in circulation today, but high quality. Mint state examples are highly prized by collectors, especially those with strong red luster. Coins graded MS65 or higher often command significant premiums because the copper surface of pennies is prone to oxidation and spotting, making pristine examples increasingly rare over time. The economic backdrop of 1963 adds further depth to the history of this coin. The United States was in the midst of the post-World War II boom. Consumer spending was high, suburban growth was at its peak, and the penny itself was still considered a useful coin in everyday commerce. A single cent could buy a stick of gum, a piece of candy, or even make a difference in gasoline purchases, which hovered around 30 cents a gallon in that era. The penny of 1963 circulated through millions of small-town grocery stores, bustling city diners, school vending machines, and corner newsstands, and thus it became woven into the daily lives of Americans in a way that later decades with inflation could never replicate. Culturally, the year 1963 was also significant. President John F. Kennedy occupied the White House, inspiring a new generation with his speeches on civil rights and the space race tragically. His assassination in November 1963 marked one of the darkest moments in American history, and it forever tied the coins of that year to an atmosphere of both hope and heartbreak. While the Lincoln penny bore the face of another martyred president, the coin circulating in 1963 carried with it a symbolic continuity between Lincoln's legacy of unity and Kennedy's unfinished dream of progress and equality. From a numismatic standpoint, certain varieties and errors in the 1963 penny series are especially valuable. Collectors hunt for doubled die obverses repunched, mint marks, and coins struck with misaligned dies which give them unique and rare qualities. Some 1963 cents also exhibit strong proof-like surfaces when produced in specially polished dies, particularly those from the Philadelphia Mint that released proof sets that year. These proof coins with their mirrored fields and frosted devices stand apart from the standard circulation strikes and are considered treasures for collectors who seek the best examples of mid-20th century coinage. The 1963 penny also represents the end of an era in metal value. By the late 20th century, the price of copper began to rise so high that the intrinsic value of a copper cent came dangerously close to exceeding its face value. This economic reality led the United States Mint to eventually change the composition in 1982 to copper-plated zinc, meaning that every 1963 cent is now technically worth more than 1 cent in metal content. Though melting them is illegal in the United States, the awareness of this underlying value has added to the interest in hoarding and collecting older copper pennies, especially those from the early 60s, as you explore the full history of the Lincoln Penny 1963 coin. You find that it is not merely a small piece of copper, but a witness to a world in transition. It circulated during the rise of the civil rights movement, during Cold War anxieties during the space race, and during one of the most heartbreaking tragedies in American presidential history. It is a coin that carries with it echoes of the nation's past, while also foreshadowing the changes that would soon reshape American currency design and composition. Collectors value it for its beauty. Historians value it for its context and ordinary. People remember it for the way it jingled in their pockets, bought candy for their children, or rolled across kitchen tables during family games. The Lincoln Penny of 1963 may be small in size, but it looms large in history. It tells the story of Abraham Lincoln, Victor David Brenner, the rise of modern coinage, mid-century American life, and the ever-shifting tides of economy and culture that shape the coins we carry every day. And when you hold a 1963 penny in your hand, you are not just holding copper, you are holding a piece of the American journey preserved forever in a single cent. Imagine holding in your hand a small copper coin that tells the story of a nation, its struggles, its victories, its values, and its vision for the future. The Lincoln Penny of 1959 is far more than just 1 cent. It is a chapter of American history, struck in metal and passed through countless hands across the decades. This coin marked a turning point in United States coinage because it was the year when the design of the Lincoln cent underwent a dramatic transformation after 50 years of the wheat ears reverse that had been introduced in 1909 to honor the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The United States Mint unveiled a brand new reverse design in 1959 that would endure for another half-century. This new design was the Lincoln Memorial, and it became one of the most recognizable images in American coinage history. The 1959 Lincoln Penny was born during the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower, a time when America was standing tall after World War II and asserting itself in the Cold War era. The coin was intended to connect the legacy of Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, with the nation's continuing journey toward democracy, freedom, and unity. The obverse still displayed the familiar bust of Abraham Lincoln, first created by Victor David Brenner in 1909. But now the reverse design showed the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., a structure dedicated in 1922 that itself had become a symbol of national identity designed by Frank Gasparro, who would later become chief engraver of the United States Mint. The Lincoln Memorial reverse was carefully detailed, even including a tiny representation of the seated statue of Lincoln, visible between the central columns. This was the first time in United States history that a person appeared on both the obverse and reverse of the same coin, a subtle but powerful statement about Lincoln's lasting impact. The 1959 penny was struck primarily in bronze and alloy, consisting of 95% copper with the balance being tin and zinc, and it weighed 11 grams and measured 19 millimeters in diameter. It had a plain edge and was struck at 3 different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Though in that year, Philadelphia did not place a mint mark on its coins. The Denver Mint used the familiar D mark and San Francisco, the S mark. These distinctions have long fascinated collectors because mint marks often determine scarcity, rarity, and long-term value. From a historical standpoint, the introduction of the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959 was not just a change of imagery, but also a reflection of the cultural climate of mid-20th century America. The United States was entering a period of great change. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, and Lincoln's role as the president who ended slavery was increasingly invoked as a symbol of justice and equality. By placing the Lincoln Memorial on the penny, the Mint was making a deliberate statement about continuity with the past, while also addressing the values that America sought to uphold in the present. Millions of 1959 pennies were struck and released into circulation, making them common in everyday commerce. Yet their symbolic importance made them special from the start. For many Americans, it was the first new design change on the cent in their lifetimes, and collectors immediately began saving examples of the coin, both in circulation condition and in proof sets produced for collectors. The proof coins of 1959 were struck at the Philadelphia Mint with a mirror-like finish and extra-sharp detail, and these coins quickly became prized among hobbyists, for coin collectors and historians alike. The 1959 penny stands out for more reasons than design. Alone, it marks the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth in 1809, the 50th anniversary of the original Lincoln cent of 1909, and the introduction of a new chapter that would last until the design change in 2009, when the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth brought yet another redesign. In that sense, the 1959 penny occupies a unique place, bridging the classic wheat-ear sense of the first half of the 20th century and the modern memorial sense of the later 20th and early 21st centuries. The story of the 1959 penny also involves the artistry of Frank Gasparro, who, despite initial criticism for his design, would go on to create other iconic works, including the Eisenhower dollar and Susan B. Anthony dollar. His Lincoln Memorial reverse was initially considered too simple by some, but in time it became one of the longest-lasting designs in U.S. coinage history, lasting exactly 50 years from 1959 to 2008. In terms of varieties and errors, the 1959 penny is also famous because of certain rare misstrikes and anomalies. One of the most well-known is the controversial so-called 1959 D wheat reverse cent coin that appears to combine the obverse of a 1959 Denver penny with the reverse of a wheat cent. This piece has sparked debate for decades, with some arguing it is a genuine mint error and others claiming it is an altered coin. Regardless, the mystery has fueled interest in the 1959 issue and made it a subject of fascination in numismatic circles. When we consider the broader circulation of the 1959 penny, we see how it became woven into the fabric of daily American life. This was the coin that children placed in piggy banks that soldiers carried overseas, that shopkeepers handed out as change in countless small transactions. It was unremarkable in value but extraordinary in symbolism, linking every ordinary American to the legacy of Lincoln and the values he represented today. When collectors look back on the 1959 penny, they see more than a copper coin. They see a milestone in design history, a reflection of mid-20th century America, and a reminder of how even the smallest denomination can carry enormous meaning in the story of a nation, from its alloy composition to its mintage figures, from its artistry to its cultural symbolism. The 1959 Lincoln penny is a treasure of history, one that continues to captivate numismatists, historians, and everyday Americans alike. Imagine holding in your hand a small copper coin from the year 1964, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary, but in reality it carries a remarkable story that stretches across American history, economics, minting technology, and even global events. This is the Lincoln penny of 1964, a piece that belongs to one of the most collected coin series in the entire world, and yet its year of issue is one that collectors, historians, and numismatists look back on as both fascinating and transitional. The Lincoln cent has always been more than just pocket change, ever since it was first introduced in 1909 to honor the centennial birthday of Abraham Lincoln, the beloved 16th President of the United States. The coin became a symbol of American pride. It was the very first circulating coin of the United States to feature the portrait of a real person, and that person was Lincoln, a man who stood for unity, freedom, and equality. By 1964, the coin had already been in circulation for 55 years, and the portrait of Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner had become instantly recognizable to generations of Americans. Yet 1964 was no ordinary year for the United States or for the Lincoln penny. It was a time when the nation was in the midst of significant political and social change. The early 1960s had seen the civil rights movement gain momentum. President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated in 1963, and the country was still grieving, and in 1964 the United States was also transitioning its coinage system to respond to rising costs of metal production and growing demand for coins as the population expanded. The 1964 Lincoln cent is particularly interesting because it was one of the last years in which the coin was struck in the traditional composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This classic bronze alloy had been the standard since 1909, with only a brief interruption during World War II, when steel cents were issued in 1943 to conserve copper for the war effort. After the war, the mint returned to the bronze composition, and by 1964, Americans were very familiar with the weight, feel, and color of these pennies, each one carrying the warm red or brown tones of copper. What makes the 1964 penny stand out in history is not only its composition, but also its mintage numbers and the context of coinage demand. During that time, the United States Mint struck an extraordinary number of pennies in 1964. In fact, it was one of the highest mintage years ever recorded, with more than 6 billion Lincoln cents produced between the Philadelphia and Denver mints. This enormous output was driven by a coin shortage crisis that gripped the United States in the early 1960s. Businesses, banks, and citizens were experiencing difficulties in obtaining enough small change to carry out daily transactions, and the government responded by massively increasing production of cents, nickels, dimes, and quarters. The 1964 penny is also historically significant because it was part of the final chapter before major changes to U.S. coinage took place in 1965. The Coinage Act eliminated silver from circulating dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content in half dollars. At the same time, the Lincoln penny continued to be made of bronze, but by 1982, the rising cost of copper would lead the mint to change the composition of pennies to a copper-plated zinc plancher, meaning that the 1964 cent represents one of the last high-production years of the classic heavy copper alloy, which collectors today cherish for its historical authenticity and solid metallic value. From a design perspective, the 1964 Lincoln cent still retained the classic wheat ears reverse, which had been replaced in 1959 with the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in honor of the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Therefore, the 1964 penny is firmly in the Memorial Reverse era, featuring Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse side. This design allowed for an unusual detail. When viewed closely under magnification, one can see a tiny image of the statue of Abraham Lincoln seated inside the memorial, making the 1964 penny the first coin in American history to feature the same person. Both on the obverse and somewhere on the reverse, Lincoln appears twice, a small hidden detail that fascinates collectors. When studying the 1964 penny, one must also look at varieties, errors, and mint marks the Philadelphia Mint struck coins without. A mint mark, while the Denver Mint placed the small d under the date. Collectors pay close attention to both versions, since billions were produced, but only certain error coins stand out. For instance, some 1964 cents display doubled die varieties on either the obverse or reverse, leading to sharply doubled letters or numerals. Others may feature repunched mint marks from the Denver Mint. These error coins are sought after and can command significant value far beyond face value in the collector's market. The cultural backdrop of the 1964 penny also makes it special. This was the year when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law. It was the year the Beatles arrived in America, changing music forever. It was the year the Vietnam War was escalating and America was reshaping its identity. In all these moments, people carried these very pennies in their pockets, buying newspapers, paying for bus fares, or saving them in jars. Each coin circulated in the hands of everyday Americans, making the 1964 penny a silent witness to one of the most transformative periods in modern history. Collectors often categorize 1964 pennies based on their condition and color, ranging from bright red uncirculated examples to brown well-circulated pieces, because copper reacts with air and moisture. The color of the coin plays a large role in its value. Uncirculated red specimens can fetch strong prices, while common circulated examples still trade for only a few cents over face value. Yet the emotional and historical worth of a 1964 penny cannot be measured by money alone. It is a reminder of a time when coinage was heavier, more substantial, and more deeply tied to the daily lives of the American people. The story of the 1964 Lincoln penny is not just about a single year of issue. It is about continuity, tradition, and change. It bridges the era of pre-1965 silver coinage with the modern clad coinage. It connects the classic bronze composition with the later copper plated zinc coins. It reflects a booming America struggling with shortages, yet moving forward with innovation. And it represents a piece of Abraham Lincoln's legacy that continued to be honored through generations every time someone glanced at that humble coin in their hand. As you dive deeper into the world of the 1964 penny, you realize that this small copper coin is a time capsule, a historical marker that speaks of industry, politics, design, culture, and memory. It is not rare in numbers, but it is rich in story, and that story makes it one of the most captivating coins for collectors and historians alike. And this is why when we speak of the Lincoln cent, the 1964 issue always deserves a special place in the conversation. Imagine holding in your hand a small, copper-colored coin that at first glance looks like any ordinary penny, but when you look closer, you realize that it carries the legacy of a nation in transition. The Lincoln penny of 1965 is more than just a piece of metal. It is a symbol of American history, economics, politics, and culture. At a time when the United States was facing dramatic change, the coin minted in 1965 was part of a story that began many decades earlier in 1909, when the Lincoln cent was first introduced to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. The design, with Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the wheat stalks on the reverse, was groundbreaking. It was the first time a real historical figure appeared on a circulating American coin. This design quickly became a national favorite, and it set the stage for the evolution of the cent through the 20th century. By the 1960s, America was experiencing social upheaval, scientific breakthroughs, and economic challenges. The year 1965 was especially critical in United States coinage because it marked the beginning of the end for silver in circulating coins due to a nationwide coin shortage and the rising cost of silver. Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content in half dollars. Although the Lincoln cent itself did not contain silver, this legislation directly influenced the minting environment of the penny during this period and increased its importance as one of the few stable copper-based coins still trusted by the public. The 1965 Lincoln penny continued the memorial reverse design introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, designed by Frank Gasparro. The reverse showed the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and it was remarkable because if you looked closely, you could see a tiny representation of the statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. This made the Lincoln cent the only circulating coin at the time to feature the same president on both sides. The obverse still carried the iconic image of Lincoln with the inscriptions, "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the date, 1965, while the reverse featured the words, "United States of America, e pluribus unum," and 1 cent. The simplicity of this design belied the complexity of the era. From a technical standpoint, the 1965 penny was struck in copper alloy, specifically 95% copper, and 5% tin and zinc, weighing 3.11 grams with a diameter of 19 millimeters and a plain edge. The Philadelphia Mint was the main producer of these coins in 1965, and because of special minting regulations during the mid-1960s, the mint mark practice was temporarily suspended to discourage coin hoarding. This meant that all 1965 pennies were issued without mint marks, regardless of their place of production, an unusual historical detail that makes them stand out among collectors. The mintage numbers for the 1965 penny were enormous, with over 1 billion pieces struck, which might make it seem like an ordinary year. However, within this immense production run are nuances that fascinate historians, numismatists, and collectors alike. Striking quality varied widely due to the pressure on the mints to produce coins quickly to combat shortages. As a result, you will find examples that are weakly struck with poor details alongside sharp, brilliant strikes, suitable for collection. This wide range gives modern collectors challenges in grading and evaluating the true value of 1965 cents. Economically, the cent in 1965 was worth far more in purchasing power than today. It could buy a small piece of candy or add meaningful change toward a bus ride, and this value gave it an everyday presence in the lives of Americans. The coin passed through countless hands in grocery stores, movie theaters, diners, and gas stations, each penny a silent witness to the culture of mid-20th century America. The Lincoln cent of 1965, therefore, is not just a numismatic artifact. It is a time capsule of life in the Johnson administration era, when the United States was dealing with the Vietnam War civil rights struggles, and the space race collectors today value the 1965 penny, not because of rarity and mintage, but because of its historical context and condition. Ordinary worn examples are worth only face value, but uncirculated examples with brilliant luster can command premiums, and high-grade certified specimens are prized for their sharpness and originality. Errors and varieties also intrigue collectors, including off-center strikes, die breaks, and double dies, which occasionally appear among the massive output of 1965. These errors transform an ordinary penny into a valuable collectible, sometimes fetching hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. From a broader historical view, the 1965 Lincoln penny represents continuity amid change. The United States Mint was moving away from traditional practices, yet the penny held firm to its copper base and iconic Lincoln image. It reflects the determination to maintain a sense of stability during turbulent years in American history. The story of this coin stretches far beyond its metal. It tells us about economic shifts, government policies, artistic design choices, and the enduring memory of Abraham Lincoln as a unifying figure for the nation. When you hold a 1965 Lincoln penny, you are holding a piece of the story of how America adapted to coin shortages, how it navigated the debate over silver and base metals, how it honored the memory of Lincoln while facing new challenges, and how a tiny coin circulated in the millions can today unlock the secrets of an entire era in history.